Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our webinar today. Until we have the chance to one day meet again in a conference and do all of this live, we are very thankful that you've taken the time to join us. We have some exciting things ahead today. Our webinar is on accelerating content for tomorrow's Terabit Society. So our Director of Asia Pacific Media and Content Product will be leading a webinar kind of talking about what we're seeing in the market today and how we're making sure that people are able to get content faster and more efficient to their end users. First things first, though, guys, we do want to open this up for Q&A at the end of the webinar. So feel free to either ping the Q&A, ping me directly, ping Gautier. We'll make sure that we can try to keep this as collaborative as possible. But with that, I would like to hand this over to Gautier to begin his presentation. We really look forward to hearing this and then hearing your guys' feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gautier Demin. As Mackenzie mentioned, I'm the Director of Content Delivery Services for APAC. And we'll dive into it. Today, the goal is to talk a little bit about our experience, everything we learned over those past few months regarding content delivery in Asia Pacific, share what we did good, what we learned to do better, and hopefully we hope that that experience will benefit you when you start thinking about your own content delivery architecture. So let's get into it. What happened over the last 12 months? Well, we've seen, obviously, like everyone, a significant growth in streaming consumption, and in particular a live streaming event, right? We've seen our viewership on platform we deliver grow exponentially, and that has been a trend observed all across the globe. So obviously COVID is meant to disappear, hopefully next year, by the end of this year, beginning of next year. But we're seeing that trend being able to stay. We see people that are migrating away from typical TV services to more like OTT or online IPTV services. And we believe that the growth that we've seen in 2020 is here to remain for the upcoming years. Now, what we noticed also is that from a customer standpoint, they've been putting much more investments into their own platform. There's been a few reasons behind that. The first one is obviously the ability to diversify revenue. So not only get revenue from your typical monetization path for your content, that being like cable operators or typical TV services, but now the digital is a big part of that revenue diversification. We've seen them also being really more willing to invest in their own infrastructure. Could it be like the one that they buy themselves, or multiplying the number of vendors they're working with, or having much more ambitious project when it comes to delivery? And that comes from the fact, as we were mentioning a few seconds ago, that we're seeing exponential growth in viewership, and you need to make sure that your infrastructure is at scale to be able to handle that increased demand. We've also seen a big focus in the ability to replicate the perfect TV user experience that you have. When you turn on your TV, it's just going to work. You're going to have HD quality. It's going to be the perfect viewing experience, right? Well, now there's really been in 2020 an increased investment into making sure that your digital experience is going to be as good, if not better, because you can add more information, you can add more value-added services, but it's going to be at least as good as my laid-back TV experience. So that has been one of the big changes that we noticed in those past 12 months. Now, let's talk a little bit about the challenges that we've seen over the past year, and then we'll talk about what did we do and what did we see to compensate for those challenges, right? So the first challenge is obviously the increase in live sports and event delivery, right? And so live delivery is something really different from VOD traditional delivery, because with VOD you have pretty stable traffic. If you have like big release, it's kind of like spread over time. Where for live event, as you can see from an actual graph from one of our customers, you see the traffic being multiplied by 7 within only a few minutes, right? The drop in the middle is the halftime, as you can guess. But really within a few minutes, you need to scale your architecture 7x, 15x, and you need to be prepared for those high peak of traffic. So not being prepared has been one of the challenge we've seen across our customers. The other thing is that with everyone staying at home and expats going to work from other countries and so on, we're definitely seeing a more geographical spread of the user base, right? If you had people that had only their viewers coming from Australia, for example, we're seeing a spread now, Australian expats watching the content from all over the world. And so your architecture need to be much more geo-diverse, and you need to be ready to handle a live event with viewers coming from all over the world. So if you have an architecture that was really strong in country, you need to now replicate that across the globe and make sure that that viewing experience is going to be as good for all your viewers, no matter where they're coming from. The second challenge we've seen this year is the change in the kind of issues you have during an event or during delivery. In the past, CDN had like global outage. Everything was coming down. It was a pretty binary issue, right? Like your analytics would detect that, your load balancer would detect that easily because it was 0 or 1, right? The platform was down, so you would be able to activate your load balancing solution. Well, now the issues that we're seeing are much more micro issues. What that means is that the issues are going to be specific to a particular ISP. They're going to be particular to a specific peering point, right? A peering point is going to be down or is going to be overwhelmed. And so you're going to have more issues delivering traffic to a certain city of a certain ISP, right? So there's really like it's harder to detect issues. It's going to impact less customers, but the effect of the outage are going to be as big as a global outage, right? So if you live in that city, if you live in Singapore, and you have an issue that is only local to Singapore, right, it's going to have a really big impact on your viewership here, right? So big change in a way in what you are expected to detect in terms of outage. One of the best ways to detect those outages, and we've seen a drastic increase in adoption for our customers this past year, has been the ability to have real-time monitoring. Not having real-time monitoring, we've seen, has created a gap between the user experience offered by our customers that had the proper monitoring in place and those who did not. So what is the proper monitoring? Well, the proper monitoring means typically being able to detect issues client-side. If I go back to my previous example of ISPs, if you have like a server-side macro monitoring, well, it's going to be harder to detect those specific issues in a specific city with a specific ISP. If you have client-side, you're going to be able, first of all, to detect that instantly, but you're going to be able to correlate quickly what is the common pattern between all the customers having a degraded experience. And you're going to really quickly find that you have an ISP issues in a certain city. So making sure that you have the right real-time monitoring in place is now, we believe, like a mandatory step, as much as having load balancing to be able to offer a proper user experience. Load balancing, once you have the right analytics, the ability to offer the right load balancing is also going to be very key, right? Because the issues are getting more micro, because the issues are much more localized and are going to impact a subset of your users, you need to have the ability to operate a load balancing platform that is going to be able to reflect that granularity of load balancing that you have, right? So if an issues impact only a subset of your users with a specific ISP in a specific city, you need to have load balancing in place that allows you to switch only those users and make sure that the rest of your viewers that have a very good, enjoyable experience do not have to load balance, do not have to switch to another vendor if they're having a good experience. Okay, so that's going to be something really key. That's been a big change that we've seen in the past few months. people having kind of like DNS-based load balancing, really binary, and people are switching to more evolved platform that have a lot more granularity and allows them to switch only a subset of their users. Coming back to the aggravating factors that we've noticed, the ability to making sure that you understand each of your vendors' strengths and weaknesses. Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. Every CDN platform has something they're good at and something they're not as strong, right? Lumen, for example, is extremely strong in video and software delivery, but up until recently, dynamic acceleration was not something we're focusing on. So there's obviously a diversity of your vendors when it comes to application, and there's also a diversity of your vendors when it comes to geographical strength. You know, I was mentioning earlier about the ability to have a global viewership. And so you're going to have vendors that are extremely strong in Asia, vendors that are extremely strong in Latin America and different regions of the world, and making sure you understand really well what application are they strong at, what region are they strong at, is going to allow you to build like a load balancing strategy that is going to be much more robust and much more stable. The part of the last two items that we identify is really also we've seen a difference between the ability the different CDN platform and those support, right? And that's something, for example, at Lumen that we have to change in 2020 in Asia Pacific over the first few months of 2020, because there's a few things that are very important with your support. The first one is making sure they know you, right? Like making sure they know about your company, they know about your architecture, they know about the importance of the event that you're going to have. And that can only be achieved if you have a local team. At the beginning of 2020, Lumen had a very limited support team in APAC. And that's something that we identified as an issue, and we were able to build a team last year that allows us to support all our customers locally, not only in the right time zone, but we know their business and we have the right language skill set also. That is very important. So, you know, making sure that you have the right support team that can react to some of the analytics you're going to collect in real time or some of the load balancing decision that you're seeing is going to be a very important aspect of a successful architecture. And finally, I would say something that we saw during COVID, right? During COVID, with the increase of demand for viewership, online viewership, we're basically seeing like people really switching to that multi-CDN environment, saying, you know, I'm going to have 2, 3, 4 different vendors, and I'm going to load balance based on their strength, as we just discussed. But then when it comes to putting that into practice, right, implementing those changes, we've been seeing that the existing CDN contract, were a roadblock to that implementation. So what does that mean? That means like, if you want to have multiple CDN vendor and you want to be able to switch quickly, you need to have the caches warm, right? You need to have every CDN vendor, like the 3 or 4 vendors or whatever the number you have, but the 3 or 4 vendors you're going to use need to have at any time a little bit of traffic so that they can keep their caches warm, so that if you load balance and a vendor goes from 5% to 50% of your traffic within a few minutes, the caches are already warm. There's no like massive amount of requests back to your origin, and you can do a really smooth and quick transition to that backup vendor. Okay, so that is only possible to keep a little bit of traffic to each of your CDN vendor if your contract doesn't have a commitment at 95% of your CDN usage, right? You need to be able to shave off a little bit of that traffic and keep it across your different vendors. So what we've seen is really in APAC a legacy of contract that were both with really high commitments and also extremely long duration, like we've seen 5 years contract, for example, which is something that we don't see anywhere else in the world outside of Asia. Now the norm is really like 12 months contract with a really low amount of commitment. Typically, we're seeing 20 to 30% of the customer overall traffic being committed, and 70% to 80% of that traffic being load balanced in real time between multiple vendors based on the type of content, based on the viewership, and based on the region the customers are coming from. So making sure that you have a contract that gives you that flexibility that you build technically is going to be a very important aspect, and it's one of the big roadblocks we've seen within that past year. So how do we, from a Lumen standpoint, how do we approach that CDN multi-CDN environment? I'm not saying we have all the answers, and there's a lot of good solutions available out there, but I'm just gonna talk for a second about the way we've been thinking about it for APAC and how do we work. So there's really three pillars that we have when it comes to the multi-CDN environment. The first one is making sure that we have a good content delivery network that is relevant in the region where they're gonna have your audience, right? We were talking about the strength, continue to build more network to make sure that we have more strength in more region of the world. The second part is really being able to offer like not only a CDN, but also backup solution or alternative CDNs, delivery solutions that are outside the norms of typical content delivery, right? So there's a few solutions out there. For Lumen, we decided to acquire a mesh company. So in 2019, we acquired a company named StreamRoot that offer mesh or peer-to-peer video delivery, because we believe that's a good complement to typical CDN delivery. But there's also other solutions out there like multicast, for example, that have proven to be a good alternative to typical CDN delivery. So the way we envision that multi-CDN environment is not only to have multiple vendors, but also to have multiple protocols or delivery technology available that are going to be able to act as a failover if anything happened to CDN. And the last part is work on being able to offer efficient traffic management tools. So in our case, it's a video-based load balancer, client-side video-based load balancer called Lumen CDN Orchestrator, that we believe is one of our main assets in a multi-CDN environment, which is client-side real-time load balancing between multiple CDN, between video segments. So you don't even have to pause the playback. It just switches CDN between every segment if need be. And I'll talk about that in a few seconds. So from a conceptual aspect, what we try to do on the CDN is be really easy to integrate within your already existing CDN architecture, right? It's really hard to do a load balancing solution if the CDN vendor asks you to change your code or change the way you operate CDN, right? So the way we try to envision all of that is by being able to say, well, we're gonna integrate easily within your current CDN integration. We don't have anything proprietary that you need to add. It's a pure like DNS-based CDN that you're gonna have. So that means like we give you a new CNAME, you implement that. We can replicate the configuration that you have with your other CDNs, and there's really no mandatory development that you need to do to onboard us, right? Same thing, a lot of reporting, we know customers, one of the challenge they have when they have like 3-4 different CDNs, it means that you have 3 or 4 different portals, and that's a pain. That's a true identified pain to have to log in on multiple portals. So we're trying to move away from that and offer all the analytics, all the platform that we have over API, so that you can build your own centralized reporting tool that gets the information from the different vendors, including Lumen, and you don't have to spend like half an hour every morning logging into like 4 or 5 different portals. We've changed the way we do support in APAC. That's also an important part, and I'll talk about that in a second. And we're continuing to expand. Like the backbone, and as I mentioned, continuing to bring new countries online, so that we're relevant in more countries, in more regions of the world. that's the footprint we're at right now. Quickly, you see the node in Asia Pacific: Brisbane, Hong Kong, Jakarta, Manila, Melbourne, Australia, Sydney, Tokyo. Very strong presence in the US, very strong presence in Europe and Latin America. Our APAC right now is our biggest growing region. There's a lot of countries today where we deliver content where we don't have node, and that comes to the specificity of our CDN architecture, which is Lumen is the largest internet backbone on the planet. And so even if we don't have a node in a specific country, all the ISP, for example, in India, all the Indian ISP peer with our backbone. So we have massive connectivity with them. And so, for example, for Indian customer, we peer with all the Indian ISP directly in Singapore. And that gives us really good performances. It's a very different architecture from in-country delivery. But the fact that all Indian ISP, for example, peer with us directly on the backbone allows us very good performances for VOD and download, for example. All right. So when it comes to local support, I talked about it a little bit in the beginning. The way we've changed to, I'm not gonna work through that entire slide, but basically the way we've changed is that we've put all the key function locally in APAC. So today we have support in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Australia, and in Japan. And basically what that means is that we can offer like localized support with overlays, so specialized sales, products. The product now, all the product decisions for CDN are made from Singapore, where I'm based. We have technical service managers in each country that are going to help you directly work on a daily basis on your CDN project, and CDN support based in Asia 24/7 in our time zone. That allows us to provide that overall local support structure that we're talking about. As I mentioned, this is something that we didn't have before and that we built last year because we identified that as a key step for us to continue our exponential growth in Asia Pacific. The pricing strategy is really a follow-up of what I was mentioning earlier. We cannot say like, well, customers should have like limited commitment contract and flexibility without applying that to ourselves first. So one of the first decisions I made when I got that new role within Lumen was we work with the evangelist team, we work with the overlays, and we identified that we needed to change the way we are doing contracts. So what that means? That means we do contracts today that are extremely low commitment or in certain specific use case, usage only. What does that mean? That means that you can onboard new platforms, you can onboard new CDN without signing without signing a massive commitment and putting in jeopardy your delivery architecture if you're not happy with that vendor, right? So it's really that approach of like being able to work with a vendor without having any financial commitment. And if you're happy, you give more traffic. If you're not happy, you remove the traffic. Really like kind of like software as a service. It's not, I don't know if that really applies to that, but that extreme flexibility in the way we do contract. The thing also that we changed is that, for many years, CDN was, if you have a big commitment, you have a lower price point. So we need to replicate that without the commitment, right? We need to be able to offer very aggressive rates without the commitment. And we've changed the way we look at CDN delivery in APAC in order to be able to accommodate that. And also being able to, we were talking about the global footprint for delivery, being able to say, well, you know what, we're gonna optimize the rate on a per region basis. Those one price fits all does not really work. Obviously, we deliver in a lot of countries, and those countries have their personal individual cost. They have their individual like peering structure and peering costs and all of that. So we're able, by doing more specific pricing in each of the region that you're interested in, we can optimize the delivery and make sure we have the best rates in front of you guys. So from a load balancing standpoint, as I mentioned, we acquired a company named Streamroot that had a very, very innovative load balancer called Lumen Orchestrator. So what does that what does that load balancer brings? Where basically it's client side, so it's a video-based load balancer. It only works for video, right? On demand, live, but only video. That load balancer sits inside your video player, so it's really like client side inside the video player, and it's going to be able to switch and load balance individually between each and every segment for HTTP video format without requiring without requiring you to reload the player or pause the playback or anything like that. So this is really like state of the art. You can detect, there's an individual ranking scores among the different CDN that is updated in real time by your device, right? Based on your individual viewing experience. And it's gonna update the score in real time and switch CDN based on the performances that we're seeing, that your device is seeing. Okay, so all the intelligence is really moved away from a server that makes decisions from hundreds of thousands of viewers at once back to your device that makes only a decision for you and you only. Okay. The second part of that we got with StreamRoot was really that CDN mesh delivery. So what is CDN mesh delivery? CDN mesh delivery is really the ability to deliver content. Instead of getting the content from a CDN, you're gonna get the content as a mix, as a draw strategy between your CDN vendors and users watching the same content as you. So the peer-to-peer network is going to be just another vendor, if you want, another pool of resource where you can get the content from. So your device is going to look at the speed at which it gets the content from your CDN. It's going to look at the speed at which it can get the content from the peer-to-peer pool, and it's going to make a load balancing decision based on who's faster. Okay, so if I'm watching a soccer game and my neighbors are watching a soccer game because I have an IPTV service, it's going to be faster for me to get the content from my neighbors upstairs than getting the content from a CDN, even if it's my city, but the CDN node is going to be further away, right? And so peer-to-peer is going to add an additional layer of redundancy on top of that multi-CDN strategy. The way it works, really simple. Everything is secured over WebRTC. You open WebRTC connection with other people watching the same content as you are. I'm sorry. You open WebRTC connection with other viewers watching the same content as you are, and you load balance, you performance load balance between. Oh, I'm sorry. This is the spring. The flowers are everywhere. You load balance between basically your CDN vendors and the pool of peer-to-peer users. Okay, so peer-to-peer, just like a multi-CDN vendor strategy, is not replacing your CDN. It's just like another tool in your toolbox that will allow you to have additional redundancy and an additional solution for load balancing your content. Okay, this is not the answer for everything, but this is a really good tool, a really cost-efficient, a really aggressive rate tool that you can have on top of your multi-CDN strategy that will help you increase the quality of service. So let's talk a little bit about that. And this is my last part. Let's talk a little bit about a case study. So we're using a large broadcaster in Vietnam that had their own CDN. They had two CDN actually. They had their own, and then they had another very famous big CDN vendor, really one of the largest one in Vietnam. And basically they were still having, because of the coverage and the size of Vietnam, they were having quality issues when it came to live traffic. So they came to us, and we were able to deploy mesh for their live event delivery. They had like more than 100,000 viewers, simultaneous viewers at peak time. They had 30 live channels. So we deployed mesh on their video player. Mesh works with all the live and VOD content. They deployed on all their devices. So they deployed on their mobile apps. They deployed on their website for web viewers. And basically, the configuration was really straightforward because it was simply live channels, and they started like seeing a majority of the traffic shift away from CDN delivery to mesh based on that performance load balance. So how does it look like? Well, if you look like that is an actual screenshot of their portal from the month of January 2021, so 3 months ago. And if you look at the overall volume of traffic delivered by the mesh over the course of 1 month, it was 54%. So what that means is that for 54% of the requests that came to their CDN, and once again, it was a very big CDN, like the number one CDN on the planet, for 51% of the requests, Mesh was actually delivering the content faster than this very famous CDN. So as I mentioned, Mesh does not replace everything. There were still 45% of the requests that were being delivered by their typical CDN load balancing strategy. But for 55% of the viewers, they got an increase in the user experience, right? If you look at the graph, that screenshot for the portal, everything that is in pink is actually the traffic delivered by the CDN. Everything that is in blue is actually delivered by the mesh network. And you see, like, the more traffic you have, the more efficient mesh is going to become. That's why for live TV, this is perfect. Everybody is watching the same content at the same time. And then the more viewers you have, the more performance you're going to get out of mesh. Now, what were the major takeaways from that use case? They were able to reduce over 50% of the CDN traffic of their CDN bill by leveraging Mesh. Mesh works with a flat fee license. So Mesh, you pay like a fixed fee every month, like a Microsoft Office license, and you have unlimited delivery. So that's really a good cost optimization strategy. The customer had reported absolutely no complaint, and they were able to mitigate capacity issues that they had with their current CDN strategy because half of the traffic was not being delivered by Mesh. Okay, so to summarize, I would say that the most important part, what we've learned this year, is really like the ability to have a good analytics platform in place, something that will tell you client side in real time the issues that they are. If there's any specific local outage that you would not be able to detect otherwise. You need a very dynamic load balancing solution, making sure that you can act on those real-time analytics and you can apply changes to your configuration in real time as fast as you collect the analytics. 3, you need to make sure that you have the right mix of CDN vendors. You know, multiple CDN vendors is very good. The more you have, the merrier, the best it is, because each and every one is going to have different capacity level in different regions and different strengths and weaknesses. And finally, to spice it up, I would say on top of that, think about alternative delivery methods on top of a multi-CDN strategy. Like Mesh, like multicast, for example, that will be able to complement an already good load balancing strategy, right? On that, I hope I was able to give you a little bit of insight about what we've been up to and what we learned from that past year. And I will be available if you have any questions.
Thank you, Gauthier. We actually do have a few questions that I will hand over to you. I'm going to just read a few of them out loud. So just give me 1 second. So our first question actually has to do with the CDN load balancer orchestrator that you mentioned before. So one thing that you did a really great job of explaining was the difference of the server side, so the client side solution versus the server side. So we're just wondering if you could kind of share more information about the differences between a client side CDN load balancer and the server side, and why would a specific, say, live streaming company pick client versus server?
Sure. So the main difference, there's 2 main differences between server side and client side. One is going to be like this, the flexibility, and 2, it's going to be about where the intelligence resides. So on the server side, you're going to make load balancing decision for a group of users. right? So, you have good server-side platform today where you can make decision based on specific ISPs, specific country of origin of viewers, specific type of content that they're watching, and you're gonna make those load balancing decision. But every time you're gonna make load balancing decision, you're actually going to have load balancing for a group of users, right? I'm gonna switch the Singtel users in Singapore from Akamai to Lumen or from whatever CDN, for example, but you're gonna make a mass decision. When you're using client side, the intelligence, the switching decision-making engine is actually on your device. It is right there. And that decision is gonna be unique to you. It's going to be unique to your environment. You might have, a building that has a weird connection. I don't know, some issues, some peering issues, or an ISP that have specific peering issues with a specific CDN. Your device is going to detect that and switch you, right? You might switch in your apartment. If I go from my living room to my bedroom, I'm going to switch from my Wi-Fi, I'm going to lose my Wi-Fi, and I'm going to go on to 4G, for example. While the best CDN for my 4G connection might not be as good as the one I have for my Wi-Fi. So you're going to really have those really granular load balancing decisions that are going to be individualized only for your own screen. And that's the key difference. So how does that translate? That translates, we've done a lot of A/B testing because Lumen also has a server-side load balancing platform called ITM, which stands for Intelligent Traffic Managers. And we've done A/B testing between the two. And what do we see? Well, we see a difference in rebuffering ratio. We see like a much lower number of rebuffering ratio when you activate client-side load balancing. We see a difference in the average bitrate watch. So we tend to see a higher average bitrate watch when client side is activated. And overall, the quality, the user experience, the quality of viewing is higher when you use client side. So yeah, I mean, we would definitely recommend that you test client side if you don't have. This is something that we offer free trials for. And it's a very quick implementation and you will see the difference by yourself.
Great, thank you for that, Gauthier. We do have two more questions that have come in. So one specifically is about application delivery. You mentioned earlier about how Lumen has, the bread and butter has always been video and large download, but we're wondering how is Lumen starting to attack from the application delivery standpoint? Is there a solution that we can use from that?
Sure. So from an application delivery standpoint, that has been a big focus from a product standpoint. I would say the second half of last year, and we're still in the middle of it. So we launched a new platform called CDN Application Delivery, which right now is in APAC only in Japan. But we are expanding and we will have the rest of Asia Pacific by the end of this quarter, which basically is a very simple concept. It consists of taking all the edge nodes that we had in Asia Pacific and now allow customers to run application on those. So instead of being just like caching nodes that will take the content and deliver it, we allow our customers to execute either existing application like web application firewall, DDoS, image optimization, queue management, things like that, or bring their own like Node.js script or containered application and run those applications at the edge. So that is really a big focus for us this quarter, making sure that we take all those standard edge nodes and make those into smart edge where you can run your own application.
Cool. No, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that was answered beautifully for the person that asked. All right, our last question here today actually is about CDN delivery, specifically from delivery optimization and other ways that you can leverage it the best. So whether it's from segregating with ISPs for end users, how do we help with achieving a higher bit rate, just some specific delivery optimization tools that Lumen is using today.
Sure. So basically the delivery optimization that we do on our side is really around enabling much more analytics that we used to in the past on our own platform, and we're gonna have the way we work is that in a multi-CDN environment, we need to learn from our customers, right? So what that means is that when you're going to start migrating your traffic, we're going to collect a lot of analytics initially in the first few days to make sure that we achieve the performances that we want to. So we're going to look at our different performances with ISP. We're going to look at the bitrate that are requested. We're going to look at overall or performances. And based on those analytics, we use some internal tools called IRT, which basically allows us to really fine tune and see where we are good and where we need to fine tune a little bit our configuration. So, it can be based on an ISP, it can be based on a specific type of content, but basically I would say the main investment that we've done to continue to improve in a multi-CDN environment was really emphasize and expand drastically the amount of analytics we have on the platform to make sure that we can detect very quickly where we perform really well and replicate those setups across other region, other part, other type of content for our customers.
Cool. No, thank you. I appreciate that. So everybody, I will put a few more minutes in to see if there's any other questions. But in the meantime, this is the end of our webinar, and we thank everybody for their participation. We really hope that it was able to give a better insight on how multi-CDN can help your environment, especially in the midst of COVID and beyond, while we're seeing viewership just increase exponentially. At the end of this webinar, you will also see a short survey, so we'd really appreciate if you could just any type of feedback in general. We will record this and make sure that we send it to anybody if they would like to share internally, externally since then. So to end, it has been a great pleasure having you guys here today, and we look forward to having you at our next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much.